Welcome to Faith and Freedom. For the next few minutes, we hope to inform, inspire, and encourage you as we discuss the legal victories and challenges to your fundamental freedoms and religious liberties. Faith and Freedom comes to you from Liberty Counsel, a civil liberties education and legal defense organization. Join us now as Matt Staver, the President and General Counsel of Liberty Counsel, explains the latest legal issues all across this country in the courtrooms of America. Liberty Counsel is winning the battle for your constitutional freedoms.
This week we celebrate Constitution Week. On today's program, we'll talk about the Constitution. We'll also talk about a victory and also a challenge that's happening in Mississippi to restore the sanctity of human life. I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. We're going to be talking today with Matt Barber, who's also with us, vice president of Liberty Counsel Action. And Matt, this entire week, Monday through Friday, we're going to be celebrating Constitution Week. And we go back and remember the time when America went through the Revolution War and then began looking around for various countries and documents, but none of them were suitable for our situation. And from that deliberation, and particularly from prayer, where Benjamin Franklin called the group together to pray, where they then stopped their deliberations, which was about ready to fall apart, had prayer, came back. A few weeks later, the Constitution of the United States was ultimately born, and this week we celebrate the longest surviving constitutional document and government in the world.
Well, in this time to take a moment and reflect upon the Constitution and the intent our founding fathers had behind framing the Constitution in the way they did, all the work and thought that went into it, it really couldn't come at a better time. Because, man, I think we've reached a point here in the United States of America, unprecedented in history, where I think the Constitution itself and constitutional principles are really in harm's way to a degree that we, at least in my lifetime, have never seen. So this comes at a very good time for us to take a moment and reflect upon the Constitution, the greatest single enduring political document in the history of the world.
And we'll talk a little bit about the fundamental principles involving the Constitution throughout this entire week, the twin pillars that Washington and the other founders understood undergird America and without which America would not work. But certainly we have a Constitution that's enduring. We also have individuals and we have courts that don't want the Constitution to operate the way it was intended, so they try to create their own ideas of what the Constitution means. We call that, by common terms, judicial activism, where they read into the Constitution things that are not there. They stretch the history and the meaning. They ignore the context, and they come up with their own particular ideology. One of those decisions was in January of 1973 with Roe versus Wade, where the 7-2 decision ultimately said that there is a right to kill your unborn child through all 9 months of pregnancy. And that 1973 decision resulted in over 50 million children who have lost their lives under the, quote, protection of the law by those who want to exercise that so-called right to abort their child. That is a plague on American history, just as much as the Dred Scott decision is a plague on American history, and also the Japanese internment that we ultimately herded Japanese together in internment camps is a plague on American history. And certainly, not only are we celebrating our Constitution, but we also have to understand that we've got to restore the fundamental principles that our Constitution stands for, and Roe versus Wade and judicial activism undermines those very basic principles.
Well, that's exactly right. Roe v. Wade is a perfect example of former Chief Justice Charles Hughes, who embraces, and I think his words really represent this living, breathing model view of the Constitution that President Obama, for instance, has repeatedly said that he holds that the Constitution is just kind of a malleable document that changes with the times, whatever the whims of the culture are in any given day. Well, we can apply the Constitution in that way and bend it and change it. Chief Justice Hughes said, quote, "We are under a Constitution, but the Constitution is what the judges say it is." No better example of that than the Roe v. Wade decision. Justices, United States Supreme Court justices, clearly looking to reach a particular end and bending and twisting the Constitution in ways that our founding fathers could have not have possibly envisioned in order to arrive at this position, this political position they wanted to achieve.
That's exactly right. Well, Liberty Counsel is working to restore the rule of law in many ways. We've been working, for example, in Mississippi, where they have the Mississippi Personhood Amendment. Initiative Measure 26, otherwise known as the Personhood Amendment. Now the court has ruled that this ballot initiative will be able to go on the ballot November 8 to restore the sanctity of life from the moment of fertilization in Mississippi's Constitution. That's what the people will have an opportunity to vote for. We have been defending this Initiative Measure 26, or the Personhood Amendment, in the courts. We argued it at the Mississippi Supreme Court against groups such as the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and the Center for Reproductive Rights. Those three organizations filed suit. They are anti-life. They don't want the people to have an opportunity to vote. And certainly our Declaration of Independence, which is a precursor and essentially a preamble to the Constitution, says that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Without the right to life, we have no rights, and the Constitution at its minimum is protecting, and government at a minimum must protect that fundamental right to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Liberty Counsel is an organization that we're in the fight a lot. So a big part of what we do is educate the public about threats that we face, our individual liberties, our constitutional rights, threats to the Constitution. But it's not all doom and gloom on Faith and Freedom. And sometimes we have very good news to report. And this is terrific news that this Personhood Amendment in Mississippi will be on the ballot to be voted on in November, this upcoming November. Voters will get to have their say, and this the radical multi-billion-dollar pro-abortion industry, it's palpable. They're shaking in their boots because they recognize that the jig's up, that Roe v. Wade is headed the way of Dred Scott, the Dred Scott decision. So they're quite afraid of this, and they should be. Similar amendments have gone down in the state of Colorado, my home state, on two separate occasions. Colorado is a very liberal state. Mississippi polls show that upwards of 80% of Mississippi voters are pro-life.
This
so there's a very good chance it'll pass.
Will pass.
Yeah.
Of course, we can't take it for granted, and we have to make sure that there's a number of people going to the polls and voting their values. But this likely will pass at the ballot box. And then, of course, that sets up a challenge directly with Roe versus Wade, because this recognizes the right of life. The right to life begins at the moment of fertilization, and that right should be protected under Mississippi's Constitution. That will set up a direct clash with Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade, when it was decided in 1973, says we don't need to decide that issue of when life begins. Yet that's a fundamental issue, and the court says they don't need to decide it. Well, they knew when life began, and in fact, the Life magazine came out with a front-page article and photographs of a baby inside the womb with a feature story in that magazine in 1965. So that was 8 years before Roe versus Wade was even handed down. So they knew what they were doing, and they decided that they wanted to push this under the guise of law and literally make the Constitution unrecognizable. This week, we need to pray that the Constitution, the intent of the document that has ultimately endured through ages, through over 200 years, ultimately is respected by the courts and the judges. And, of course, it makes a difference as to whether you have a governor or a president or some other electorate that puts in place judges that don't respect the Constitution. As citizens, we have a duty to make sure the judges that are in place, whether by election, appointment, or any other way, understand and respect the Constitution.
And the court is different now. And, those justices, they said at the time, we can't know, or there's not a consensus on when life begins. And I'm paraphrasing. Therefore, we need to err on the side of protecting a woman's right to reproductive freedom and liberty and right to privacy, this overreaching broad catch-all that they throw out there. But now there is a consensus. In fact, an overwhelming consensus that human life begins at the moment of conception. That's a game changer in terms of Roe v. Wade. And we have a court now where certainly it could be 4-4 with Justice Kennedy really being the swing vote here, but many speculate that he may be looking to try to make an amends for much of the wrong he's done, unfortunately, on the life issue.
Well, this is Constitution Week, and so we want you to not only understand the Constitution, but give it out to other people as well. We have the Patriot's Handbook on American Liberty. That's the Patriot's Handbook on American Liberty. And we're offering these constitutions with the Declaration of Independence, Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech, and an essay from me regarding liberty for $1 plus shipping and handling. Or you can buy 10 of these, $10, and that includes shipping and handling. I would encourage you to buy 10 of these. For $10, you can get 10 of these pocket-sized constitutions, pass them out to your friends, and this week of all weeks would be an appropriate time to give these as gifts. Christmas is coming up as well. You can give them as a gift during Christmas. Pass it out to your local Tea Party groups, your local church groups, your political groups, your community associations, and make sure that this week is celebrating Constitution and that we restore those fundamental founding principles. You can go to Liberty Counsel's website for more information at lc.org.
You have been listening to Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel. Our hope is to encourage and inspire you to stand up for your faith, family, and freedoms. We can accomplish a lot when we work together. Get informed and get involved today. Sign up for our free monthly newsletter, The Liberator. We will send it out to you free of charge. Stay informed with our Liberty Alert email update. Just click on the website at www.lc.org or call us at 1-800-671-1776. Tune in next time to learn more about your rights right here on Faith and Freedom.